The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Good evening and welcome to Bronxtalk. In a borough that has had the identifying slogan, "Don't dump on the Bronx," it's often fallen to the residents themselves to fend for themselves and create their own organizations so they can effectively advocate and empower themselves. As a result, the borough's numerous not-for-profits are central to life here, maybe more so than any of the other boroughs. Into the mix has stepped the Jewish Community Relations Council and their We Are the Bronx Fellowship that provides free training to help not-for-profits survive and thrive. We're going to meet the originator of the WATB Fellowship and one of the members who is completing his year of participation. But above all, we're going to delve directly into an important but understood part of life in the Bronx. Of course, the phones are open. We welcome your input into the program. You can call in at 718-960-7241. You can also email them to us, questions or comments, at bronxtalk@bronxnet.org, or post them on our Facebook page, and we'll read them on the air during a future edition of our program. But for the here and now, the director of the Center for Community Leadership of JCRC, Rabbi Bob Kaplan. Nice to have you, sir.
Thank you.
And from the Long-Term Recovery Group, a Bronx not-for-profit and a Bronx Fellow, it's Jonathan Soto. Good evening, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us today.
Rabbi Kaplan, let's start with you. Characterize, if you would, the state of not-for-profits in the borough of the Bronx. I mean, we have many of them. I think I explained it correctly that we want to fight for ourselves here. Where are we at as far as not-for-profits go?
Well, there are a lot of Bronx not-for-profits. And let me just talk about what not-for-profit means. It's a tax designation. And so there are some large not-for-profits like hospitals or the Bronx Zoo that have a lot of money, and there's some really small ones operating throughout the Bronx, making sure that the quality of life of those living in this borough is the best quality of life possible. So each and every one of them, when they wake up in the morning, whoever's in that not-for-profit thinks about one thing and one thing only. How do we make a better quality of life? How do we make the Bronx better for everyone that we serve?
Did I characterize that properly, that in the borough of the Bronx, I mean, we were talking before, there are 4,000 not-for-profits in the Bronx.
Well, that's the rough number we're hearing.
And my sense, because as you know, I've run a couple of the workshops and things like that, is that there's real passion for community groups and neighborhoods that people in the Bronx really want to fight for themselves. Characterize the Bronx versus or vis-a-vis other boroughs.
Well, the Bronx always feels like it's a stepchild.
Well, this is what I said.
And therefore, those who, again, wake up in the morning and, own their issues, own the problem-solving process, are really looking at how can we move it beyond what everyone else thinks we are. How can we make sure that healthcare is the best healthcare in the city? How can we make sure that we're taking care of all those in need? So I'm not going to, listen, we operate 7 different fellowships. We have one in Queens, one in Brooklyn. We're about to start one in northern Manhattan. So we care about the whole city. The Bronx is a special thing to me. First of all, I live in the Bronx now. I have to admit I'm Brooklyn born and raised. And
we'll forgive you.
I always kid around. I had to take a 12-step program to be able to move out of Brooklyn. But I get my fix every so often, but living in the Bronx is real important. But the issue is that folks really have taken command and taken the lead of allowing for the tide to turn in the Bronx, owning the problem, but more than owning the problem, owning the solution.
Before we bring Mr. Soto in and let him talk about his experiences and his perception, why the WATB fellowship? How does it work? I mean, to me, this, as I expressed to you before the show, this is one of, I think, the most important kind of movements in the Bronx, because now we're taking, maybe I'm answering my own question, now we're taking, these not-for-profits and trying to help them do better.
Well, one of the most important things that happens at We Are the Bronx, which is now part of the Center for Nonprofits at Ostos Community College in the Bronx, is that folks step outside their either ethnic, linguistic, or vocational silos, and they learn how to solve problems together. So folks from all different kinds of backgrounds, all different kinds of issues that don't normally sit at the same table and look at the same issues together are stepping out, learning how to work with each other, improving their skills, but the most important thing is that they now know somebody else cares as much as they do. And it strengthens them, but it also strengthens incredibly the problem-solving process.
All right, Jonathan Soto, so let's talk about why you got involved, briefly about your not-for-profit, and what the year of participation in WATB has meant.
Well, for me, at least, I live according to a certain phrase, and it's isolation is the enemy of hope. Whenever you operate by yourself in a silo and you have this insurmountable
problem.
problem.
From him.
Absolutely. Adopting this language right now. But when you operate in a silo, and when you operate because you have this moral imperative to be able to try to change or shift or alter your environment, and you're doing this task by yourself, it can get frustrating. And there is a really real phenomenon called burnout, that when you try to mount this mountain by yourself with no assistance, it may adversely affect your ability to do good work. So with a fellowship, at least for my not-for-profit in my experience, not only was I able to connect with amazing peers that were doing phenomenal work in the Bronx, but I received the tools. For example, you came into our show, and I've been using those social media and media tactics to be able to improve my public relations outreach. But we received professionals. For example, we had a not-for-profit board consultant that taught us how to better structure our boards. We had media
board
consultants.
membership and leadership and things like that.
Absolutely. So it's not only interacting with peers, but interacting with subject matter experts and being able to receive this knowledge to move forward.
And when you say move forward, what is that move forward? Because if it's not for profit, I mean, I realize people who work there make a living, but what are you moving forward with?
Well, we're moving forward with being able to create substantial impact in the lives of the most neediest and vulnerable residents in the Bronx. So, for example, we had a fundraiser that occurred a couple of weeks ago.
I was there.
It was phenomenal.
Yes,
we had
it was.
great music. It was at the beautiful space at the Bronx Documentary Center, which I always let people know you should absolutely go there. But we raised $7,000 that night. $7,000 for the two specific programs. One is for college-bound readiness, and one is for healthy nutrition. So what we do is once we receive those funds, we divvy up the $7,000 into microgrants. So we were able to create 7 microgrants for $1,000 for organizations that deal with those specific issues.
Who's the we?
We,
I mean, I know who it is, but I want to
Yes.
define it for my friends and neighbors in the Bronx.
The Bronx Fellow is an eclectic group of amazing professionals that are either executive directors or directors at their not-for-profits. So off the top of my mind, we have folks from Bronx Health, we have folks from Morris Heights Care
Health
Center, Health Center. We have folks that work with a gardening entity in the South Bronx. It's a really amazing broad effort.
And so, Rabbi Bob, if you just hang on, I want to just pursue this a little further. So the idea was you get these lectures, and as we mentioned, I did do one of them, and I've been doing them, whenever I can. But then also you put something together, right? Just go through that process, and let's talk about what are the things you tried to do and how you come to some agreement.
The best part of this fellowship was the degree of autonomy that we were given by the organizers of the group. We separated into 2 groups. One is the development committee, and the other is the grant-making committee. the development committee has autonomy in how they pursue to
So
raise
you
those
almost,
funds.
I'm just thinking aloud here, you almost set up your own little not-for-profit,
Yeah.
and it was an exercise in what you do back home anyway, back with your groups. Bob, one thing that I've had a number of conversations, when you look at 4,000 or potentially 4,000 organizations, and you're beginning to get to a point where, okay, they have something, and all of a sudden they have something in common, and now you've got them working together. Is there a way to have an umbrella group of some sort, an organization, to speak for one voice, whether it be for legislation or for policy or for other things, to empower the whole group? Are we getting to that point where we should have, the Bronx not-for-profit grandfathers?
So you sort of read the minds of the alumni from the first year. They really enjoyed the process so much. They enjoyed being with each other so much that they formed the Bronx Non-for-Profit Coalition.
Where have I been? I don't know what's going on.
Meets on a regular basis, that is looking to strengthen the not-for-profits outside of the context of the fellowship and the Bronx Center. They are looking to work with politicians across the Bronx to bring additional resources to the kinds of projects that they can work on together, but really raise the visage of the not-for-profits. One of the things that we saw is, for instance, most grants in the city, I believe it's over 80% of all grant money from foundations goes to Manhattan-located organizations. Now, some of them are, listen, my office is in Manhattan. I have to admit, my office is really my car. But many of them serve the Bronx and serve it well. But there has to be a notion, that's one of the reasons we created the foundation that Jonathan's talking about, is that we want people to know how to share resources on a localized level. How do you raise resources? How do you share resources? And how do you make decisions together?
I got two questions for that. Number one, this is going to be, right at you. So what are you about? What do you want to see out of this? Why create this? And what is the long-term vision about happening?
Well, it's really a long-term vision of everything we do at the Center for Community Leadership. I am a child of the 60s in many different ways, but one of the ways is that one of my great teachers, one of my gurus, was a fellow named Smokey the Bear.
That's Smokey the Bear?
Smokey the Bear. Matter of fact,
only you.
Well, that's it. The illustrator for Smokey the Bear just passed away recently, but he used to come on, and all these little animals are behind him, having been burned out of their forest because somebody was careless. Somebody didn't do their right job. And he would say, and in his bear-like way, only you can prevent forest fires. So me as a kid understood that it was really my job, not to put out the fire, but to do everything we could to prevent it from happening. And that's only by people doing the right thing, giving them the right tools. So when we were asked over 20 years ago after the riots in Crown Heights to help heal some of the wounds that came out of those riots, we saw, well, it's okay to do the basketball games, it's okay to do the dialogues, but we had to create sustainable relationships that were going to allow people to understand that they could change society. They could go right to the crux of why problems happen. And only by learning to work together could they prevent forest fires.
And then the follow-up has to be, because this is a very strong philosophical foundation that you're resting this on, but the follow-up has to be a reality. If you want to do this, it requires funding to bring in the speakers, to get the space.
Sure does.
As not-for-profits know all across the board. So where does that come from? Who supports this?
One of our main supporters is J.P. Morgan Chase.
Really? I did not know that.
And this is the way it happened. We had a long-standing relationship with Ostos Community College, and we did a forum, a training right after the economic downturn on how non-for-profits could weather properly the economic downturn. One of our speakers was a woman named Gayla Jennings O'Byrne, and she is one of the VPs at the foundation. After that, she walked over to us and said, we have an issue we want to deal with. We want to strengthen the non-for-profit sector here in the community. You guys seem to know what you're doing. You seem to know how to put it all together. What's your dream? So we already
shared the dream that you just shared with us.
We had already had one of these fellowships for teens called Youth Bridge. We had another fellowship that we had just recently put together based on Youth Bridge called We Are All Brooklyn.
How long ago was that?
Youth Bridge was founded.
No, I mean, how long ago was this conversation?
This is in 2008.
Wow, okay.
And she said, write me a proposal. Within 3 months, we had the funding for our first fellowship.
Wow.
It's now going into its 6th year, and they have been constant supporters ever since, really believing in what we're doing and the impact it's making on the community. And with the proof of the pudding came the Bronx Center.
Jonathan, we had the Morris Heights Health Center, we have your organization, there was the gardening organization, there were a whole range, really just about anything you could think of that would be a not-for-profit in your group. You settled on college-bound readiness and health nutrition to focus on, even though in many of the cases those were not items specifically directly related to what those not-for-profits were. Why was that the direction and the focus?
Well, look at the numbers, right? You had just mentioned the disparity that exists between Bronx funding and Manhattan funding. So a report came from Brown University that showed that 90% of students in the Bronx's 5 poorest neighborhoods are not ready to go to college today. 90% in the top 5 poorest neighborhoods are not able to go to college. Go down a couple of miles down to Tribeca, 74% are ready to go to college, but they only have a poverty rate of 10%. Additionally, if we look, the Bronx is full of food deserts. So what are food deserts? You may have a food desert if it's easier for you to get potato chips rather than real potatoes. You may have a food desert if it's easier for you to go to McDonald's as opposed to a food market.
And everybody recognized that.
Yes, everybody recognized that, and the data just shows, right? I'm a very data driven person, so if the data shows me a reality, then it's my job to articulate what the narrative is in order to receive funding and then come up with creative solutions with the proper support.
My next question, it may be very obvious, but really the crux of the exercise, the crux of the matter, and also maybe an example to folks who are watching us, can we solve these problems, and what did you do to say, okay, in our small space, how, or at least with this resource that we have, how we're going to address it?
Well, change begins with us. It's very simple.
Well, you guys are on the same page, that's for darn sure.
It's true. You have to be the change you want to see. And if I truly believe if people get together in a room, talented, bright, and eager people get together and choose to solve an issue, that however incremental the change may be, after the first attempt, that in itself would breed into multiple opportunities to be able to truly address these issues. That's why I was ecstatic to see that we raised, even though $7,000 may seem to be paltry to some, this was an unprecedented year for the We Are the Bronx Fellowship. We broke records in terms of fundraising, in terms of application set, and now we've created the foundation for the next fellows to be able to rise above that bar.
So you raised that money through the event that you had?
Yes.
Right, and that was the idea. An interesting question would be about competition for dollars. I mean, if you're all looking for the same grant money, Rabbi Bob is acknowledging that. So here you've got all these groups, and you say, okay, somebody makes a presentation on how to get grants, and every organization calls that grant maker, oh my goodness, where are we going with this?
You put your finger directly on it. The issue of the foundation and the training that comes along with it really started with this Youth Bridge group. These are talented, incredibly Youth Bridge. That's the teen program. Yeah. They call it shared resources for a shared tomorrow, and that's really the essence of it. What you've seen throughout the city, and certainly in the Bronx, is competition for dollars. So how do we stop competing on that level and begin to understand that only by cooperating, only by partnering, can we use the limited resources that are out there? We're not going to see more resources. I mean, that's the nature of the biz. There's going to be a steady decrease of resources, and it has been for the past 25 years. Only by utilizing our togetherness, our partnering process, can we use the resources in the most effective way. More than that, if we stop kicking each other and beating up on each other and only work to strengthen each other, the resources get used in the most effective manner possible.
How bad or good is the climate for the money? Are there other Chase Bank foundations out there now that, in this day and age, because maybe things have changed from what they were, that can fund this, or is it really grasping at very small straws?
Fundraising is always a difficult challenge. However, what we've been able to find is, and by the way, JCRC does not take one dime in government funding. This is all being done through philanthropic and corporate donations. So the center at Ostos can take some government money, and we're really gearing up towards that because that's sustainable money as well. But what we're really looking to do is ensure that economic partners in the Bronx, you mentioned malls that are opening up, folks that are looking at the type of folks that buy things here in the community, whether it's a Chase or it's a corporation or somebody else, they can step up and need to step up. We just have to show them the value added to who and what they are.
Just using the idea of malls to start. So we got, and when the borough president comes on here, he's going to be the first one to boast about these. We got the new mall in Cobb City. We got 2 malls opening up in Kingsbridge. You know, and I'm sure there's a longer list that I'm recalling right now. You got the Paragon opening up down by the Whitestone Bridge. Is the climate now potentially out there for not-for-profits to take advantage of this, because these are corporations and big companies looking to do well in the Bronx and spread their reach? So
we have to learn how to partner with each other. I know that we've been very successful in Queens with our Queens Fellowship. The Queens Mall, operated by Maze Rich, which is one of these
That's
huge...
the one in Regal Park, is it?
Yeah, a huge developer across the country. They actually own the Cross County Mall as well. Has really partnered with the Queens Fellowship. We're looking to develop those kinds of relationships here with the Bronx.
Oh, I would like to say that nice and loud because we're on TV now, and I'd like to spread that. So let's repeat that. We're looking to partner with those organizations to not only come in and build them all and provide some jobs, but also really help build and empower the community. Because then they'll do better.
Community reinvestment. If the folks that live in communities can see them as a partner rather than just a place to buy stuff, then they will feel more akin to going to that particular mall or that particular store.
Jonathan, real estate is a big thing for not-for-profits. You know, one of the things that some of my research and discussion with people showed up is that we have many new immigrant groups. We have West Africans moving in, Muslims, Cambodians, and others moving into the borough of the Bronx. These people will want to start a not-for-profit. What about space? Is there community space? Are there places where we can have these collaborative projects? I know Hostos is doing very well with that.
Well, there's kind of these 2 vehicles that we could use as solutions. Business incubators and places that provide technical assistance and some seed money for these immigrant groups that are coming in and trying to start a new business. For example, it's very difficult to start a new business without having to pay an accountant, having to pay a lawyer, having to pay for filing fees. But if groups can come together, let's say in a cooperative, share those costs, and have a system where they could distribute profits and earnings in an equitable way, not only will that lower overhead costs, but incentivize these groups to be able to partner together in a communal fashion. So we continue talking about sharing resources, and it's not that we're hearkening back to the 60s movements, but we in reality, that's how we are able to succeed in a post-2008 Great Recession era. The money is not coming unless we begin to empower ourselves and understand that our destinies, as MLK said, are intermingled and intertwined together.
Okay, he wants to add something. I wanted to follow up.
So I want to add a real example. Up in Parkchester, which used to be a heavily Jewish community, the Jewish community moved to other places for lots of different reasons. When the last synagogue closed up in that community, talk about community helping community, and the community became primarily African and Bangladeshi. One of my dearest friends in the world is Sheikh Musa Drama, who runs the Islamic Center on, I think it's Westchester Ave, heard that a synagogue, some older folks needed a place to pray. So guess what you have inside a mosque here in the Bronx? The only place in the world, by the way.
Wow, what a great story. I'm going to bring them in.
You have a synagogue in a mosque in Parkchester. And then what we've been able to do is leverage dollars to come in from lots of different places, and God willing, there'll be even more of it. We just were able to get a $20,000 grant. We got a $5,000 grant last year, and we're meeting with Citizens Committee about this relatively soon to have the Riverdale Y, Manhattan College, and others come in and help rehab the space. We bring in teens, we bring in students from the college. They come in on a regular basis, and they're painting, they're cleaning, but they're making sure that communities know how to cooperate with each other. Now, it's a small step, but if you can do as Jonathan said, work together, know how to share resources on a local level, amazing things can happen.
Jonathan, in the past, it was thought that not-for-profits were in the pockets of politicians, and certainly in the Bronx, unfortunately, we've seen a nice legacy of, the wrong kinds of not-for-profits being funded and the money's, being, moved around in unfortunate ways. Is that changing? Are we doing a better job now than we used to?
I hope so. As a future attorney, I think that there needs to be a more transparent system when it comes to viewing what type of funding goes to what groups. And I think the City Council has reformed their discretionary funding or discretionary budget items. And that's a good step forward, because in order for us to be able to dispel the darkness, we must bring it into the light.
We're just about to wrap up. Your fellowship has ended, or it's going to be ending, or?
We actually have, I believe, a session that is left. We're going to do a conference, and then we're going to have an amazing graduation ceremony, I believe.
Gary will be
June
invited.
19th.
I hope. And so then what's next? You don't seem like the kind of person who's going to let this go.
So the great thing about it, a lot of people that fundraised for us during this year are actually alum. A lot of alum from the program. So
you're building a larger
It's a family.
community.
It's a huge family.
Rabbi Bob, I want to give you the last word. I want you to tell all our friends and neighbors in the Bronx how to be part of this, because you're accepting now applications for the next year. What do we do?
Sure enough. So right now we are, as you said,
about
accepting
30
applications.
seconds, so go ahead.
You can go to www.wearethebronx.org, or you can go to jcrcny.org and look at the sign-up materials. Become a Bronx Fellow, because Jonathan just said it. They're a good family.
And who should be thinking about applying?
Anyone that is in the not-for-profit of the faith-based world that is looking to improve what they do and how they can make a better Bronx for everyone else.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining us, Rabbi Bob Kaplan and Jonathan Soto. To me, this was as uplifting a show as I could do, because people are talking about people getting together to change things, and that is music to all of our ears. Thank you so much for joining us. Folks, if you have further comments or questions on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, then you email them to us at bronxtalk@bronxnet.org. You post them on our Facebook page, and we'll read them on the air during a future edition of our program. You can be a fan of Bronx Talk on Facebook. We wish you would. You can see the archives at bronxnet.org. You check out the Bronx Talk link on the bottom right navigation bar, and you can see the old shows. And now we've got a nice schedule for the upcoming weeks. Next week, in honor of Memorial Day, a show about women in the military. And then the week after, an amazing video, which I saw at the WATB event at the Bronx Documentary Center. We're going to show that video, produced by young people, that takes you to the heart of healthcare issues in the Central Bronx. Then on June 9th, in advance of Father's Day, a show about Bronx fatherhood. And make a note, on June 16th, it'll be the debate for the 13th Congressional District. Congressman Rangel, Senator Espaillat, Yolanda Garcia, and Michael Walrond have been invited to participate. We expect that all will accept that invitation, although that hasn't happened yet. Only Michael Walrond has accepted. We're going to certainly reach out and hope that everybody will join us that night. So that's what's coming. Thanks to producer Jane Filoro, director is Shirley Arietta. Thanks to these guys for doing the right thing, and we'll see you next week.